There you go. Recording start.
Okay, it started.
Yes.
Very good.
Here.
Welcome from the IIBA Tampa Bay, Florida chapter study group for August 24th of 2023. This is our next to the last study group for this month, and this is our 88th class. Today we're going to be talking about the techniques from the BABOK, the item tracking, and lessons learned. Jim Simmons has been kind enough to volunteer for item tracking, and Bob is going to talk about lessons learned. Our mission here at the IIBA
Screen
Tampa
is not shared. Sorry.
Thank you so much. I had it shared earlier, didn't I? Our mission here at the IIBA Tampa Bay is to bridge the gap between industry leaders and business analysts by building partnerships with professionals, educators, and employers so that we may empower, instruct, and engage the BA community. We've given you a variety of ways to reach out to us. This is our Thursday night study group from 7 to 8 Eastern time. We have our past meetings recorded, and those are available for you. We will give you a site for that in just a moment. We also have the IIBA website, meetups, Zoom, Facebook, and LinkedIn. So if you want to reach out to us, we're available to you. Watermark Learning has been our consistent supporter. They've given us access to their test questions for our class. They've also given us a discount code, TampaBayIIBA21. This will give you 20% off of all their products. They have business analysis products such as flashcards, practice study questions, and classes, as well as a variety of other topics. Our board is volunteer. We are led by Cliff Gray, president. You can see him here in, I think that's a Millennium Falcon. Yulia is right here. She's our vice president of finance. Caitlin and Priscilla are board members at large. My name is Thea Soren. I'm the vice president of career and professional development, and we are looking for you. We need more board members. So if you are interested in participating in our community, we don't ask for a whole lot of time, but we do ask for you to be on our board and help us out periodically, either with a skill you're trying to develop or a skill that you have that you want to exercise. We have two very important people with us. They are our study group advisors. Bob Churchill is right here. He has earned his CBAP certification as well as a variety of other certifications. He also has an awesome website called rpchurchill.com. I'm going to show you a page of that in just a moment. And we have Yulia, I never can say your last name right.
Petrunina.
Okay, Yulia, she's right here. She is also a certified business analyst professional, earning her CBAP after participating in our class. Because they are participating in this class, this study group hour is allowed to be used for an education credit for you if you would decide to apply for one of the certification courses. Certification tests with the IIBA. So thank y'all for participating. People that have attended our class and earned their certifications is just continuing to grow. And we really appreciate people letting us know. Nino, I may not be saying that right, notified me the other day. He is now working with the IIBA in the Philippines, and he's asked me to be a guest speaker for them. He was a class member of ours, doing most of the things by recording. Frank also did everything by recording. He lives in Africa. We have people from all over the world that contact me, and periodically they'll let me know of their successes, and I'm happy to put them in here. Okay.
Renu from Canada, for example.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, Renu is from Canada.
Yeah.
Renu, incidentally, for those of you who have been with us for a while, Renu is traveling for several weeks, so she won't be with us for a little while, but she'll be returning when she gets back and participating. I want to draw your attention to this document. This is rpchurchill.com. Bob put in an incredible amount of work to give us all of the information, all of the links, all of the classes, all of these recordings by topic. And if you scroll down, you'll get to the guest speaker series. You'll get to the, here we are. Here's the links. Cycle 1 is last year. Cycle 2 is this year. We're working on cycle 2 now. If you see something in here that doesn't have a name beside it in cycle 2, and it's not covered in this class, it's available for you to present. All we need for you to present is what is in the BABOK so that people learning from you can have that information so that whenever they take the test, they can have that information. And if you have any experience or any examples of that particular topic. Additionally, down here, we have our guest speaker series. These are people with titles that are interesting to business analysts because we either work with them or we might want to work with them or we might want to become them. So I encourage you to look at these recordings. This one right here by Yulia is one of my very favorites. She took and passed the CBAP exam, and it wasn't very long ago. She talks about what surprised her, what she encountered, what things that were very important for you to know whenever you take the CBAP exam. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Jim Simmons to talk about item tracking. Welcome, Jim.
Having a little trouble with my display right now. Let me share the screen with you.
Okay.
Do this. Okay, can everyone see my screen?
We can, thank you.
All right, so we're going to talk about item tracking, and this should be fairly short. And we're going to talk, just put this in the same format as the BABOK. This concept is technique number 10.26. We'll talk about the purpose and description, the elements, usage considerations and examples for item tracking. And then we'll talk about your experiences with item tracking. And so let's see. So the purpose and definition for the BABOK is the item tracker is used to capture and assign responsibility for issues and stakeholder concerns that pose an impact to the solution. The definition, an organized approach used by business analysts to address stakeholder concerns. Stakeholders may identify item types such as actions, assumptions, constraints, dependencies, defects, enhancements, and issues. And so the purpose and definition here continue. When a concern is first raised, it is assessed to determine if it's viable. So is it a viable concern? If so, it's classified as a specific item type, allowing it to better be tracked and controlled by a process that works toward the item's closure. So the idea is to put items on the item tracker that relate to the solution and get them closed. During the item life cycle, it's assigned to one or more stakeholders responsible for the resolution. It tracks the item from initial recording of this concern, its degree of impact, and to its agreed upon closure. The item tracking record may be shared with stakeholders to ensure transparency and visibility, and into the status and progress of items in the record. So that's a long way of saying what I'm going to summarize in a moment. We already have a project issues log. Why would we need an item tracker? That's the main question I get when I'm talking to project managers about business analysts item trackers. So the way I think of it, and we can talk about this, is that the item tracker it differs from a project risks and issues log in that a project risks and issues log is designed to capture issues and risks that impact the overall project. These may be related to resource availability, timelines, scope, or budget. Those are kind of bigger picture items, the way I think about it. And so I think of the project issues log as applying to the project management life cycle mostly. An item tracker, on the other hand, from a business analysis standpoint, is really focused on the impact to the solution. These may be related to requirements, designs, observations of the solution, concepts, usability, or policy decisions which need to be made in order to determine how the solution should behave. Albeit some of these will impact the project and might get escalated into the project risks and issues log, I think of the item tracker as more pertaining to the system development life cycle. So the elements for the BABOK are listed here. I'm not going to go through all of them, but you have to have an identifier, a summary, category, type, date identified, who identified it, the impact, possible consequences if the item is not resolved by this resolution date. The impact can be assessed in relation to the initiative's time, cost, scope, or quality. The priority, getting people to prioritize things is, correct my spelling here, is important because you're going to get a lot of these if you delve into this. The resolution date is the date by when it should be resolved or closed. The owner and the resolver. I think this is interesting here. The resolver, stakeholder assigned to resolve the item, and that's differentiated from the owner. So those and these fields here are all part of element 1, and they include the agreed strategy, the status, the resolution updates, and the escalation matrix. I haven't got an escalation matrix, but I'll show you some other things I've got in my item tracker. I think this is a great idea, having an escalation matrix, because you can then determine who to escalate the decision to and agree upon that escalation process if needed. So element 2 is item management. How do we manage the items in the item tracker? Each item's resolution is undertaken as prescribed by stakeholder needs and organizational process standards. Managing the items, one item may cause another item to be recorded and tracked. Close attention is needed so that the resolution efforts are coordinated and not duplicated. Each item is tracked to its closure or resolution. So it's fairly simple. The stakeholders benefit from this is on metrics. Stakeholders benefit from detailed information about the items and their progress, but they can also benefit from key performance indicators to see how well you're doing at resolving the items overall. If you have a lot of items and you have an interested audience, you can track, how long is it taking us to get decisions? Are we making our timelines? Are we missing our timelines because we're not getting decisions in a timely way? Usage considerations, the strengths are that it ensures concerns around stakeholder requirements are captured, tracked, resolved to the stakeholder's satisfaction, and allows the stakeholders to rank the importance of outstanding items. Limitations are that you can get bogged down in a lot of details and spend a lot of time doing that and collecting statistics if you're not careful about just making sure the right items go on here and you groom the log in a judicious way. So that's what the BABOK says. So I'll show you how I'm using an item tracker. What I did with the item tracker I have is I added a few attributes. I wanted to know which meetings these need to go to. I'm actually using the item tracker as a kind of agenda. So if the design team meeting is the appropriate place to bring up the item, then it gets assigned to that meeting, and I filter on all the design team meeting items. I have a next review date and a last review date so that we don't have to review every single item in the tracker. So I can say, oh, when are you going to be done with that? And we'll put a next review date on it and only review those where that next review date is today or has passed. I have a defect number from our application lifecycle management software, which is used for tracking defects and doing testing. So if the item has become a defect and we're testing it, it's related to a defect that we've logged, I'll put that item number so I know that it's been moved from the tracker to our ALM software. And then change request. If the item's a change request, I actually put the change request ID on the item so that I know, hey, I'm tracking all the details over here in this change request. And then inform of decision is who should be notified when a decision or conclusion has been reached. Who wants to know? So those are some things I added. I'm sure there are many other attributes that people have found handy. This is a kind of a picture of the spreadsheet that I'm using. So we've got the ID, the status, priority owner, category function, title, summary. So I can, these two here, the category / function gives me what piece of the software we're looking at. In this example, we're looking at the icon wall. But if I want to, this allows me to filter on the different parts and pieces of the solution that I'm talking about, the taxonomy. And then there's a title summary. So in this case, it's icon design. There's the details. The dependency and justification are here. You can put that in. Over here, you can see down here the impact, which meeting this would appear on, in this case, design walkthroughs. What's the next review date? And the type. I free-form these because we come up with different types all the time. In this case, it's a design question. So we need this question answered before we can move forward. So that's why I put it on the item tracker. Who submitted it, the date entered. Any questions on kind of how I'm using the item tracker or anything we've said so far? And also, how are you all using item trackers? Does anybody else have examples of item trackers that you're using?
I actually have a question, like for group discussion. How would you use item tracker in agile environment?
It almost seems I'm just going with
Because like you are talking about item tracker, I'm thinking about stories, right? Specifically assigned for that purpose.
Right. I wonder if you would really put that on your backlog.
Team backlog, yeah.
Well, before you get to the point where it's a story, whenever it's still, a design question or, determining the things you have to do before you determine it is a story or it is a defect. Those could go in the item tracker. And
I have
the
two
only thing,
comments.
I'm sorry, the only thing I do differently than you do, Jim, and if you'll go back to your example, is in the category, because my lists tend to be really, really long and have a lot of different elements. For in the category function, column F, I do a three-way. I have a naming convention where it's like it's 3 different categories. And so that way, whenever I sort it, it sorts it into the subcategories as well, but it's still in the first category. And if I keep it all into one column, I don't have to worry about complicated sorting or filtering that way. I use a lot of filtering, looking for things, but that way it keeps it together.
That makes sense. So you put in a kind of a taxonomy, a 3-level taxonomy in there. So then you can say, oh, well, we're talking about this module maybe, and within that, we're talking about this screen, for instance. And within that, we're talking about all of the patient identification fields or whatever. And then that's a great idea.
For instance, if it's a website, I would say on the splash page, on the banner, for seasonal, so it's 3 different things. The only thing you have to do whenever you're doing that is always do a space hyphen space between them, and you got to be consistent or it doesn't sort right. You had something, Bob?
Oh, I had a bunch of comments. One is, and they're all good. First of all, this is great. Second of all, standard tracking tools like Rally and Jira are modifiable, so you can add whatever fields you want, and there are search and link functions and database functions and functions attachable to generate values in those fields. So there's really quite a lot you can do with it. You aren't limited to doing creative things in a spreadsheet. I would love it if a practical custom tool were put together to think about tracking things in the way I think about them. I'll get to that in 1 second. One issue, based on something you said, you always, Jim, make me think of different use cases or ways of thinking about things. I usually think about item tracking in terms of traceability, and it's all, what actions have to be done in every phase, and who's got to do it, who made the request, who's permissioned, and how does it link backward to the previous phase and forward to the next phase. And I will drop a couple of links in the chat about that. Hopefully it will treat it as two. It may not. It may have glommed them together in one. I hope not. Anyway, you're always working in solving the actual problem and doing the actual work and maintaining and supporting the actual environment and a few other dynamics in items can be targeted to all of those things. So that's really interesting.
If you are using something like Rally or Jira, and you have the ability to customize it, that's great. But the item tracker is really good to take care of issues before you get to that. Once you get to Rally or Jira, put in your defect or user story in this and transfer that information into Jira or Rally, and then don't try to keep things in two places. One of the biggest rules we have is you don't keep information in two places, because then one of them is going to get out of sync with the other. Somebody's going to see an old version of something. So put on this, transfer to Jira, no longer active, color code it, gray it all out, do something to show easily that this isn't something to pay attention to any longer.
Also, based on what Yulia said, in principle, tracking things should be no different in traceability or any other way between Agile, Waterfall, Kanban, Scrumban, or whatever else. So it's all the same works. It's all responsive to some kind of business need. It's all based on what's happening now, requirements, design, implementation, and test, and you have to track across all these things. And the talk I linked to is a way to use tracking tools to manage traceability both across phases and in terms of kind of a logical hierarchy of the design, meaning it at right angles. So there are pictures for that. Again, it's me talking, so run it quick. But there's a whole video there. There's a slide deck. So I highly encourage you to look at that. And everything Jim said is covered in that, or I say everything Jim says because he's the man.
He's the man.
Bob, I'm always amazed at the wealth of knowledge you share and the detail that you go into. It's wonderful. I don't have experience with Jira or Rally, and I would like to have that experience. In knowing how we can go from something as simple as the one I've presented to something that's really nicely interwoven with everything else in a system is great. I think one of the things where we start getting some odd leaping off points is when we start logging defects in ALM, and we've got our item tracker and we've got our requirements over here. And like you were talking about, at some point it's smoke and mirrors, and you start going, wait a minute, I got to clean that item tracker out and say, look over here now. It's not here. So having an everything tool would be wonderful to have.
No, Jira and DevOps do the same thing. They are great for that.
They are.
Yep.
They are great for that.
Your only limitation with those as far as customization is in some organizations, they lock it down where you can't customize it, because if you change it, it changes it for everyone else using it. And that could cause some confusion.
Yeah, you're messing with the corporate template. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
The other thing is, I always find using tools like Rally and Jira, some people are so intimidated by them. And if you're around software for a long time, it takes a while to get up to speed. It's just another tool. Take a 6-hour Udemy course on how to use it. And I took one and never used Jira, but went to an organization that used Rally, and I knew everything I needed to. I didn't have to administer it, but I could talk to the administrator, and it was easy to figure out how to use it the way I wanted to and communicate with other people. And that's in the end what it's all about.
Really is. Has anyone
Yeah,
else?
and one note about Jira. This actually came up in one of our projects. Is Jira is a Chinese company. Not that there's anything against that. It's but it was a government client that could not use it because it's actually all the data is stored in China. So if you run in any clients that have that kind of issue, Jira becomes a problem. DevOps is of course Microsoft, so that's all over the place, but just a small note for Jira.
Yeah, just to be aware. Somebody posted a question about getting a template like what you have, Jim. Would you mind creating a template and dropping it into the Google Drive for us?
Oh, sure. I'd be happy to do that. I'll take now understand that this is my handmade item tracker.
That's okay.
Other maybe more slick ones, but yeah, I'd be happy to, and let me know how you guys work with it. If you pick it up and it's useful, or you've added some new things, that'd be great to know.
Well, here's the
Yeah.
deal. Any information management tool is only as good as you create it to be if it serves your purposes. If it gets to be too cumbersome, people don't update it. If it gets to be too complicated, people don't update it. And you want something that you want to stun them with simplicity when possible, but have the details needed. So, just enough, but not more. Don't spend any more time than you have to doing something just because I need to color code that column. If you are using Excel, use filters, use conditional formatting, use drop downs. It will speed you up considerably if you are using an item tracker. And if you get more than say 20 or 30 rows, go ahead and make it easy on yourself. Has anyone else used an item tracker or something similar?
I've used punch list defects list. I mean, there are so many contract terms, checklists. There have been a ton of different kind of ad hoc ways, and tools like Jira and Rally are modern instantiations of punch lists and bug lists, and that allow you to automate and do more things. So along the lines of what you were saying, Thea, the best tool is one you actually use. And don't worry if it's not fancy, if you share it, if you get done what you need to get done, that's the tool.
Right.
Spreadsheet, a bulletin board, post-its on a wall with columns, whatever it takes.
Right.
Zola has raised her hand.
Yes.
Yeah, I was just wondering, is there a difference between item tracker and issue log? Is it this? Because I know that item tracker is used for like to list all the problems that you have in the project. And I think issue log is almost the same. Are they the same?
The way I define the difference, when a project manager comes to me and says, well, we've already got an issues log, a risks and issues log. I tend to focus on the project risks and issues log when it comes to higher level decisions, like we need more people for this project, or we need more time for the project, or the scope is expanding, we need approval on that. But when I think of the item tracker from a business analysis side, these are things that the project managers that are on my projects really don't like to see in their issues log. They want to, it's something I want to see in my detail, like when I'm going through requirements or I'm creating a business analysis approach, I'm down here in the system development lifecycle, and the issue and risk log is up here in the project management lifecycle. So I try to keep those separate.
Okay.
We've got more hands raised. Leanne?
I would like to ask could you name some real scenarios that we can apply use item tracker on? For example, do the BA use it during the development life cycle with the team to track the defects or bugs? I'm not sure it's their duty. And the second is what about on UAT? Is it also one of the scenarios we can use the item tracker?
From my experience, I don't try to track defects in an item tracker. So bugs, those kind of things, I tend to put in software that we're using for testing. The item tracker I start using as soon as I join a project. I can't tell you how many projects, as soon as I come in, I've got items, even if they're talking about scope, if they're talking about requirements. If you think about the system development life cycle, there's stuff that happens even before that in planning, before you start doing requirements and design, where you have like, I need a decision on whether we're doing this part of these requirements so that I can do my business analysis plan. I'll start throwing those in the item tracker so I can get those decisions from people. So I try to differentiate defect tracking from item tracking. Bob or anyone else have a different take on that?
Well, that's a really fascinating, actually, and I see the wisdom in what you're saying. The items I dropped into the chat, especially the traceability, well, they're both traceability, the slide deck, I can actually walk you through that briefly. It addresses all those things. It addresses who does the work, the kind of cascade of breaking things down in from big concepts to little concepts, you know, epics and stories and actual tasks. And then I'm tracking the tasks across everything. And if there are problems, that makes a task item that is separately trackable, but they're all linked and they're all part of a unified system that tracks all of those. So it's all in the same kind of thing. It's just a way of how you think about where you're doing things.
Thank you. I understand what you mean, Jim. Because I see that there is an item called category. So I think we can put whether it's in a requirement, elicitation stage, that certain items fall into that category. So it's very useful. Thank
Yeah,
you.
it's kind of free form. You can do it whatever makes sense to you. I tend to look at categories as things like, is this a question? Is it a design decision? Is it, you know, those kind of things, but you can use it all kinds of ways.
Yeah. Great, thank you.
Cynthia has, thank you, Leanne. Cynthia has dropped several questions into the chat.
Oh, yeah, I just, the first question I had was that, would you use the item tracker to see if there are any discrepancies or risk in the implementing specific requirements to see if the solution is the right solution for the client? So I just want to know, is that the understanding of using the item tracker within your analysis?
Personally, I've done that. There have been design solution recommendations that have been talked about in certain committees, and I'm concerned that they might not be feasible. And so if I'm in a design session or something like that, I might drop that into the item tracker. And then, you know, the meeting column that I have in mind, I might put it to steering committee. And they'll say, it's escalated to steering committee. We don't think this is feasible. So again, that's not necessarily a project issue, it's a solution question, right? And so, yeah, I would put that in the item tracker and then get it to whatever level of committee it needs to go to. Thea, were you going to respond?
Yeah, there's two things I want to be sure everyone understands. Anytime you have a question, it can go in the item tracker. It doesn't matter, you know, what kind of question it is. It can go in the item tracker so you can be sure the question gets answered by the right people. And there's going to be a column in there of status. And if the status is it's closed and here's the results, great. But you need to know what the status is and what the next steps are on it. And, you know, you got to track it that way. But have a way to say this row is finished. That way you're not overwhelming yourself with 200 things and it's like, I don't know if they're finished or not. They're just all on my list. But make it easy on yourself. And secondly, whenever you're working with an item tracker the very first time, start with the fewest columns possible. I mean, find your basic 10 columns, things that you know that you're going to need. And if you need to add a few more, go ahead. But what you want to do is you want to kind of refine it where you know it works for your group and then introduce it to the other BAs. Because what's going to happen is your team is going to get familiar with using an item tracker. They're going to get familiar with referencing the item tracker. And then whenever people move from project to project, if everyone is using basically the same template, it's going to be a whole lot easier for everyone to use the same process, be familiar with the project, the template, and to be effective. If everyone's using absolutely different formats, it's much more complex for people to say, well, wait, where is it on this one? I don't know where it is. And you know, some people will just stop right there. But if everyone has kind of a basic template that you share amongst everyone, whenever you're working with somebody else, helping them, whenever a developer's looking at someone else's item tracker, they understand how it's being used. They understand the format. Sola, you have a question?
Oh, sorry. I also have one more question
Yes.
about using both the item tracker and the issue log as part of your analysis as a BA.
Okay.
Just to keep track of, are we the solution that's being presented and also with the project, is it going in the right track? Would the BAUs also refer to the issue log that's being maintained by the project manager?
I regularly log issues and risks in the issue and risk log for the project and let the project manager know. Oftentimes, my items become issues or risks for the project. Not always, but sometimes I'll start out in my item tracker and I'll say, you know what, this is so big, it needs to go to steering committee and it needs to be escalated to the status report. And that's when I put it in as an issue or a risk on the project management issues and risk log.
You have to have a good relationship with your project manager to have this kind of communication. Sola, you had a question or comment?
Yeah, I have a comment. Is it okay if I just talk about what we have in the BABOK? So yeah, I think BABOK agrees with Jim talking about putting the risk into the issue log. It says that item tracking is used to capture and assign responsibility for issues and stakeholder concerns that pose an impact to the solution. And then just the next paragraph says, item tracking is an organized approach used by business analysts to address stakeholder concerns. Stakeholders may identify such item types as actions, assumptions, constraints, dependencies, defects, enhancements, and issues. So it's mostly about the solution, just like Jim said.
Right.
And by the way, I just did my CBAP like on August 22 and I passed. So it's still kind of hot in my head.
Yay!
Oh, yeah. How was it? How was your experience?
How was your
It was
experience with your CBAP?
Oh, very good. I mean, it's like practical.
Good.
Practical.
Very, very good. Well, welcome.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions about item tracking?
No, but we added another person. That's awesome.
We
Love it.
did. Okay. Well, you are welcome to continue to come. And if you want to commit to continuing to come, I'll put you on that slide that says you're one of our resident CBAPs.
Thank you. I watched all the videos that you did with the questions. So that really helped me.
Yeah,
Well,
it's
we
very
are so
helpful.
glad to hear that.
Thank you.
I'll tell you, Cliff gets the credit for creating all those videos. The rest of us just show up and get to talk. It's great. Okay.
I wanted to add a comment. So my team, we use Jira, and I'm curious to know if anybody else use Jira, but how we do it. We don't have an item tracker like this. So if there is a story or a feature or an epic, and there is some kind of issues or things, it's entered as a comment in a story or feature or an epic. And it's tracked through labels on a story level or a feature level. But we don't have something separate that somebody is tracking anything. It's kind of like automatically based on what you work. And I'm curious how others could using this Jira. Bob has an answer.
Yeah, we have a whole
problem-
separate section for that in Jira in ours. Because that's got to get ugly if you're tracking it all back to the same story.
It's like, yeah, I mean, you can filter out through labels. This is what we do. This is what I've seen so far.
The problem with Jira is it's flat and it only tracks issues a limited distance. Like I assign something to somebody and it goes through some steps and it's resolved. The thing I talk about in the slides and the talk where I ramble over the slides is it actually creates a series of boards that are independent for each of the 6 phases I identify. And then they're tied together with links so they reference forwards and backwards. So they make a requirements traceability matrix, and you can have columns that you can, or tags or items that you can search on to say, what are the high priority bugaboos we gotta work on and escalate this week. So there are a zillion ways you can use it, but it takes all these tracking tools up at another level of tracking by doing the links between boards, because there's only so much complexity you could track on a single board. And you have to tie boards together. But when think about the Apollo program, I mean, there's 800 contractors putting together a zillion different components, and there are all the stages and support stuff and satellite tracking stations and tank manufactories and whatever. And projects can get so big and unwieldy, you have to have ways to compartmentalize things and stick them together as higher level components on the one hand, and also be able to go down in the weeds on another. So ideally, you could use a tool like this to everybody does their little piece in their local area, tracks across these 6 phases, and keeps everything straight.
Okay. We have only 14 minutes to talk about lessons learned. Bob, do you think that's enough?
We can, or we can just talk about item tracking more. It's just a great subject.
It is a great subject, and we could talk about Rally and Jira and how to use those.
Let me share something, as long as we're beating this horse to death, and
Well,
maybe
let's be thorough.
Maybe it's just me beating the horse. So I taught, can you see this?
Yes.
Mhm.
All right. So when you do an effort of some kind, it's all the business analysis stuff here in the middle, in a project management wrapper, right? And then you streamline it to do these 6 phases, what I call, and I stuck data in here. And if you'll notice the assumptions, capabilities, and limitations, and risk and impact, especially risk, they're really done all throughout the project in every phase, so they don't really get their own shout out in this diagram. And if we simplify it more, what you're doing is figuring out what you're trying to do, figure out what's going on now, find your requirements. There are many different kinds of requirements. Do your design, do your implementation, and do your test. And I talk about that many slide decks. There's a series I did, the TWSL series, and you can find all 14 talks I've given so far that build on this idea. This is talk 10, and I do the same thing the BABOK's doing. I just do it, tell the story in a slightly different way. And like we were mentioning previously, you do the same thing in waterfall as you do in agile. They look a little bit different, and they all involve this iteration within phases and between phases, right? So you're always talking with people and working with people. And as a BA, you should know about and be able to interact with people in all these phases. It shouldn't be just send the junior BA out to gather requirements, write them all down, then go work on something else. That's hideous. It's just a misunderstanding of what BAs can be. And I think they should be involved with the whole life cycle and bring all this capability to it. So in Agile, like in Waterfall, you may do things more or less in order, but as a practical matter of any project with sufficient complexity, you're going to be iterating back and forth, especially with implementation and test. You always go through a number of cycles with that. In Agile and Scrum, you do in the beginning 3 phases, dumping them into the backlog, slowly breaking them down and slowly picking them off to actually be worked on and implemented and released. And work can be going on in all those phases all at the same time, but you're fundamentally doing the same thing no matter what management environment you're in. And here's what I mean by traceability, right? So you want to make sure all the items that you identify that you're gonna work on at a high level are addressed in requirements and what's going on now, if there is a what's going on now. If not, you do this someplace else. You do it based in or buried in design. Then you do implementation of all the items you design and test of all the items you implement. So there should always be that link. And here's where it gets complicated. May have to skip a few. There are a bunch of combinations and permutations. That's the conceptual model thing. That's the assumptions and simplifications are happening everywhere. In a rare case where items that are in the conceptual model, what's going on now, are not carried forward through the rest of the process because we're assuming or simplifying them away and maybe replacing them with something else. So that's a rare case where you don't trace in both directions all the way through. And I go through a few more of these. And here's where I talk about the BABOK usually talks about traceability as a kind of top-down hierarchy. And I was looking for, I always thought about it as tracking across phases. So you make sure you do everything you mean to, and that you don't leave anything undone, any loose ends, and you don't do work that isn't directly tied to or answering something the business actually needs, just because it's cool. And I finally found a way to visualize this. So here's the traceability across phases. And you can also have your logical design hierarchy coming in at right angles, and everything would trace through elements of design. But even that is hard to build into something you can use in an item tracker. So I finally figured out how to use item trackers for all that. And there are two different parts of this. One is the kind of logical design hierarchy, and the other is the business breaking down initial concepts into workable chunks, right? That you can assign and work. So I came up with the idea of making boards in every phase that basically is to do, then you assign it to somebody and put it in work, and they review it and you iterate. So here's the iteration within that phase in a circle. Then you get approval through whoever it needs to have approval from, and then it's complete. And then it can link to items in the next phase. So when something gets, if you imagine Post-its, you do a series of Post-its, you finally migrate them across to the complete thing, then the spawn to do items in the next phase. In each phase, the number of columns might look a little bit different, and also there you can have the design hierarchy and the epic down to story down to task breakdown kind of in line with this traceability. So that's where these columns come in: top, middle, bottom. These are arbitrary ones. And the key to making this all work is having these links, finding out a way to have these links embedded into an item tracker. So you can do it graphically in Excel or something like that by making child rows and whatever, you know, in rightmost columns, or you can have a naming convention or actually references. So if I had this item X1, I could have a child field that said, okay, name all my children, and they would have the names of all the child items. So you could be able to do a search. Rally and Jira have search tools that allow these things to reference each other, and it can be doubly linked backwards. It gets a little unwieldy to do in practice, but conceptually this is kind of the way. And every one of these little boxes here that you're moving can have all the stuff Jim talked about. So you can search and figure out what statuses are and what's important and who to talk to. There are points of contact. There are history of it, you know, as it moves across. And probably if you have these hierarchical things, only the bottom leaves would actually move into review and approval and complete, but the links will stay to the higher level categorization and tracking. I hope that all makes sense to you. And that's about the linking. That's about the how items would move as they're being worked. And then I talk about some of the different columns you might have in all the different phases. So many of them are the same. Once you get this idea in your mind, it kind of covers all the things and all the different ideas you all are describing and have been struggling with. You've actually given me, by talking about it, a deeper understanding of this. It took me a long time to solve this problem, to even get that far. I worked on this post for months and just couldn't make the conceptual breakthrough. But I finally did, and I hope you find it valuable and germane to this conversation.
Very good. I want to thank Jim and Bob and everyone who participated in the conversation. Y'all made this meeting much better. I want to give you a warning about Item Tracker. First of all, if you do it only on your own computer, it's going to be a little bit of help. If you do it on your own computer and share it with your team on say during stand-up every day and make it visible, it will be helpful to everyone and they'll hold you accountable to keeping it updated. It is critical that you keep it updated. It's one of those things that if it becomes stale, it's going to cause confusion, difficulty, and people will say, in a month down the road, hey, let's look at the item tracker. And you'll have to say, oh, I haven't kept it updated. And you never want to be in that position. So do it out loud in front of people, make it as simple as you can, and keep it updated. And you'll maintain the integrity of the item tracker. Ladies and gentlemen, we are at the end of our meeting. Next meeting, we will probably talk about lessons learned. And again, if you will access the Google document that has a list of the link on Bob's website that has a list of our techniques to see what other techniques need to be covered, you can see it's not super hard to do. Take it straight out of the BABOK. You don't even have to put it on a PowerPoint if you don't want to. Just show us what's in the BABOK and then show us examples of the technique. And then, of course, we'll have a conversation. Those of you who participated, you made this meeting better. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. And we will see you next week for the 89th class. So, see you there. Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Good night.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, bye.